Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Sarah McCrum, and I'm so happy you're here. This is a real first for me to share an interview with people who are in my ecosystem, and you've signed up for something with me at some point. And I want to share this. I want to interview Joan Ranquet, who is a master communicator with animals. I'm actually going to let Joan introduce herself because she naturally knows far more about herself than I do. But I'll tell you a little bit about how we got to this place. Joan and I have been working together and having some real fun together, actually, around her manifesting some of her financial dreams. As you will know, that's the work that I do most of the time. And we got to know each other. And she interviewed me a few months ago. And what really struck me was how similar, how much synergy there was between the way she communicates with animals and the way I teach people how to communicate with their higher self, how to communicate with money, and how to communicate with all kinds of other whatever intangible sources and beings and energies. And so that kind of made an impression on me. And then I thought, why don't I introduce her to you? Because I'm sure that if you're an animal lover and you've signed up to something with me, you might really appreciate the similarity of approach. It was really quite remarkable. And so that's how I come to be introducing somebody who's actually all about animals, um, and has been doing it for a very long time and has an absolutely natural inborn talent for that. But she's also been teaching it for something like 25 years, maybe longer. And she runs a school for animal communication and also energy healing. So, Joan, if you can, let me give you permission just in case. If you can unmute yourself, I'd like to introduce you and welcome you to this group of energy and consciousness lovers, I would say. So welcome, Joan.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a big honor because, I think we all look to you as a leader for that. So it's really fun to um, marry our expertises because at the end of the day, as contrived as it sounds, it's all energy, right? So
Yes.
anyway, thank you so much for having me here because I'm also a big fan of your work, and it's brought a lot of help to me and my school. So thank you.
Oh, that's nice. Joan, I'd love to hear, because I don't know the story myself, actually how it all started for you with animal communication. I have this picture that you were probably a child and found you could communicate with animals, but I'd love to hear what the real story was.
Yeah, well, I would love to think that as a kid, I did know that I was communicating with animals, but I think that, like a lot of people here, that had an awareness of something other than themselves. Whether was aware early on that I was communicating with my plants. So I think that there are a lot of us that just had this thought that maybe something bigger was happening, but society kind of shut it down. So it really, one of the ways that it's all started was I was a horse obsessed kid, like maybe your sister was, and completely horse obsessed. And it was the first word that I learned how to say was horse, but it didn't quite come out like that. Not mom or dad, but horse. And so um, when my mom would take me to horse shows and things to be able to see horses. And when I was 7, I went to this Catholic girls' school where there was a big horse show, and a big benefit for the school was they were going to raffle this horse off. And so my mom took me to the horse show, and she bought some raffle tickets. And I told her at that time, I said, Mom, that's my horse. And she said, Oh, no, honey. She didn't want me to be disappointed. No, no, no. We've bought 5 chances, but it's not your horse. I'm like, Mom, that's my horse, 7 years old. No, I'm quite sure of it. And I went home and I told all the neighbor kids that I had a horse. And um, the next thing you know, I hear the phone ring. I was out in the backyard playing and bragging about my new horse. And I don't usually brag. So that's how much I knew I had won the horse. So I hear the phone ring, and then I hear my dad cussing, and he never cussed. So he was like laughing and cussing. And the next thing you know, we're in the car going to meet my new horse. So that's kind of one of the ways that it really began. And um, I didn't get to keep him for various reasons, but by the time I was 11, I got another horse, and so 10. So I was just always in that world. And um, I mean, it was child labor at the time, but I did work at a stable when I was like 11. And anyway, I was just always around horses and dogs and cats. And I rode through college. And I was always connected, and I was always that person that, if the neighbors had to give their horse a shot, I was calm enough. I had a calming energy on animals that you wanted me there in the emergency for sure. And I just kind of knew what they were thinking or feeling, but I didn't put a name to it. And as years went by, I was very invested in the whole theater and film world, and lived in New York and then in Los Angeles. And the first thing I did when I got to Los Angeles was I got a horse. And it was, I was a starving artist. And this horse was what I would consider, and some people that are here today might relate to. This horse was like my soulmate animal. And I would say that while she didn't reflect me in all ways, there were certain ways. I always said that she was my first spiritual teacher, because I was really trying to practice mindfulness at the time. And so when I was riding her, and I was in my 20s, when I was riding her, if my thoughts went to like, oh, did that audition go well? She would buck. Like she had mindfulness for me at the forefront of her mind. Like she was going to make sure that we stayed connected. And so I was first introduced in the 80s to animal communication, because an animal communicator came out to the farm where I kept her. And I was blown away. I was blown away at the things that happened, that the woman said, that there's no way she could have known. And I also felt really connected to my horse after that. And it was almost like a drug, like, let's get the animal communicator out, like, because I'd feel so high for about 3 or 4 months, and then I'd want that boost again. And the animal communicator always told me that I could do it, and not I being special, but that it is something we all do. And I didn't necessarily believe her. And then it wasn't until about 92 that I bred that soulmate horse. And the night of the birth, she got very, very sick. She gave birth, but 14 hours afterwards, she colicked, which for some horses can be gas, and for another horse, it might be death. And unfortunately for her, she was just this side of death. And so I had to separate the foal and the mother. And I became mother to an orphan colt. And I kept the mother alive. And I don't say that with pride. It taught me a lot about, I was really learning energy work at that point. I went to energy work before animal communication. But anyway, the mare stayed alive for a couple more months, but stayed in ICU through most of it. And it really scared me at the time, because I thought I had felt like she had stayed alive for me. And I've come to find out that nobody can do that. But it really taught me a lot about, energy, animal communication, and just what our role in someone else's, how far do we go, so to speak, with healing? What is natural? What is going to take? It was like a 2-month PhD course. Plus, I was living in a stall with my orphan colt, and I lost him at 3, but in that course, those 3 years, I learned so much about animal communication, behavior, and nutrition. And it's all the stuff that I want to make sure that I wish everybody on the planet knew, because I don't think we'd have such a throwaway society with animals. But anyway, that's actually how I got started. Then I took some classes, and the Los Angeles Times did an article about me in like 96 or something, and it was like lighting hay on fire. Everybody, it exploded. So that's kind of, that's
The
um,
real
the,
story.
the real story. Yeah, it was epic at the time. And now I see those two horses as kind of the pillars of my school.
I have a question. How did it impact you losing your soulmate horse at that time?
It devastated me. It devastated me. And I had lost my sister in 86. So I had gotten this horse in like 88 as kind of my way of, or 89, whatever, right in there. It was, um, it was me coming back to life, so to speak. And so to lose her was, it's probably still to this day one of the most devastating losses of my life. Like, my friend was driving behind me as we were coming out of the hospital, and she said on the freeway she could hear me crying in the car behind her. I mean, I was just devastated. But I didn't, when you have an orphan colt and you're giving a baby a bottle every hour, you can't, you know, you can only cry so much. I had to keep moving.
And over the longer term, did you was there something that came out of that experience? The double experience. It was interesting. I didn't know you'd lost your sister. My sister also died when I was 30. So I know,
Yeah.
well, it's a very unique experience for each person. But yes, it's a very shocking thing at the time. But I wonder what's come out of that kind of experience of life and death and love over the years, which you got to meet very young.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. For one thing, I was, before my sister was diagnosed with cancer, I was living in New York City, and I was obsessed with alternative medicine. And so I came running home to my parents saying, "Well, she's got a brain tumor, we can save her." And, you know, I went to the New York University had an alternative medicine library. And so I pulled everything out of there and went back to Seattle and tried to share my new great knowledge. And I was just laughed at. And and my sister died literally on the expiration date. But ironically, no one got rid of that material. And 2 years later, my other sister was diagnosed with AIDS, and she's still alive. And so all of a sudden, that alternative information became valuable because maybe we could use it with this sister. So um, I, so for me, the energy healing, my sister, I would say, is what got me going with the energy healing. But with regard to losing Pet One, was her name, and then Pony Boy, I think the school came out of that. And the school communication with All Life University, I mean, it really put me on my path for becoming an animal. I mean, it really was that. I always say that I had the opportunity back then to become an animal communicator, but I didn't do it. I mean, I could have studied with that woman in 88, right? Like, there was an opportunity a few times a year to like go down this path. And instead I chose to knock my head against the wall with stupid Hollywood projects. I mean, it was fun, but I was like, I made, uh, I made choices when my soul was telling me all along, you could do this, you could do this, your path is going to be easier. And I didn't. And I think that I learned quite so much out of that. Every single thing that I learned is part of my teaching today, because you can't, like, I was not a good horse mother. I made every mistake, and I learned a lot about boundaries because of that. A horse mother is going to have way different boundaries than I have. Another huge valuable lesson I learned was how too much emotion, so to speak, involved with even a soulmate animal leads to really bad decisions and often unwanted behavior. So, for example, I had so much guilt for my orphan colt that maybe I made some sort of mistake, that his mother died, and therefore my guilt and feeling sorry for him opened the door for a lot of bad behavior, and I see that every day with people with rescue animals. Like, they feel so sorry for the animal that came into their house, and the next thing you know, the dog is pooping on their desk. Well, how did it get on their desk to begin with? So, like, the people, I think that was one of the most valuable lessons was, if we have boundaries and detached compassion. I mean, of course I've got immense love, but it doesn't mean that I don't have really particular boundaries based on species, so that we have a really great connected relationship. And ultimately, it led to something I talk about in both my books called emotional leadership, that we have to be the emotional leader with and for our animals.
I imagine that there are many people in this session right now. First of all, I imagine everybody here either has an animal or is pretty obsessed with animals in some way, um, and that they can relate very much to the emotional connection with animals and may not necessarily see themselves as communicating. I mean, obviously, people communicate all the time with their animals, and they're constantly trying to understand them, and maybe understanding them and maybe not. So I'm really curious about how does it go teaching people how to communicate with animals? What do they need to learn? What's the process of that, just roughly?
So let me talk about communication for a second, and then, well, I'll tell you what the process is. The process is being able to really get quiet. So meditating, um, being in a situation where the information is verified for you. So you create a telepathic muscle, if you will, and then practice so that you start to trust yourself. And then just putting yourself in a situation like a class where it's neutral. You don't have an agenda to the outcome. And so you're able to stay really neutral. Like, if my dog had an injury this weekend, and I ended up at the um, at the emergency clinic, and if I needed for that vet to tell me what I wanted to hear, and thankfully I got what I wanted to hear. But you know what I mean? Like, I didn't want to hear it was some spine-eating cancer, so thankfully it wasn't. But once we're very vulnerable and have an agenda with our own animals, so sometimes to really learn it as a skill, it's best to take some classes with neutral animals. But that said, the process of communication itself, if we were to just look at that, what happens in our home and even what happens as a professional, is if we look at how animals communicate with each other, basically, and going back to emotion, I say that their entire survival is based on emotion, on feeling. If you look at a herd of horses or antelope, they might be peacefully grazing, and one of them gets wind of something out of the corner of their eye, or they hear a trampling, they suspect the worst. They're An energetic vibration roars through the herd, and the next thing you know, the leader's like, "We're going that way." So that's a herd of horses. A pack of dogs, a pack of coyotes, a pack of wolves, they work in the same way. They're always connected to each other. They're always checking, reading, body language, telepathy. And a flock of birds, cats, even feral cats in a colony, they're all picking up on the vibe, if you will. So I like to say that their survival is based solely on emotion, on feeling. And so what happens in our home is we aren't necessarily setting up the safest situation for them, even though, we might give them their favorite foods and we might do certain things. But when we bring in a level of stress, we're not contributing to their need for safety. And their need for safety is almost paramount to anything that any of us need. We can't even accept emotional love if we don't, on some level, feel safe. So, that, so when I break down telepathy and how I teach it, is that telepathy is a transference of pictures, words, and feelings. And so I know that if we were to poll all your people here, that some of them have gotten pictures from animals before, some of them have gotten words from animals before, but almost every single person here has gotten a feeling from an animal. And so I would say that then they're already animal communicators. And then it's honing in on, if I'm neutral enough, I'm not making up or projecting onto what that feeling is, or what that picture is, or what those words are. I'm just a translator. So we all have, we're all, how you see the cell towers? It's sending and receiving at the same time. It's broadcasting. Every single tree, blade of grass, human, animal, is a cell tower. And so, um, we're always sending and receiving information all at the same time. And so when we slow down and get really quiet, we can get a stronger sense of what it is that our animals are trying to share with us, and what it is that, we would like them to do. And one of the things I say is, telepathy isn't an action verb like sending and receiving. It's actually a state of being. And if we could get really quiet, we can live in a state of harmony that we almost don't need words. So, we get into an ecosystem, or as Rupert Sheldrake calls it, a morphic resonance. But it's important to be aware of what you're sending to the animal. If you're saying, oh, I don't want my dog to get on the couch, but you're thinking about, when I leave the room, the dog's going to get on the couch. The dog's going to get on the couch because he's reading into your, not just your words, but your pictures. So the first step is becoming aware of what we're thinking, what we're sending, and how we're being with our animals.
What you're talking about so much continues what I said right at the beginning, is just this
Hmm.
feeling of how very connected it is with what I'm teaching, and because it must have a very powerful effect on families and on children when people can become quiet enough to be able to have this level of telepathy with their animals. That's going to transfer to the people around them as well. Do you have some stories
Absolutely.
to tell of what the changes are that people experience?
I always say that, like with my big program, people that want to be animal communicators, that, they are, they think they're coming in to become an animal communicator. They're going to change, they're going to experience harmony eventually in their household, and they're going to, really be on a soul's journey. One of my students who just graduated and is one of my teachers, she's a perfect example. She's actually, um, she just moved to Florida, so I can't call her a typical LA chick anymore. But she had this sort of like, LA yogi mom, kind of like, I've got my, I'm dropping my kids off and I can come by sort of energy about her. Really fun, lovely, um, but not quiet. Um, and and so she started working for me. It's my friend Claudia. She started working for me, and she would bring her dog to work, and her dog was scared of men. I mean, like, 9 things. I can name 9 things that were going on with the dog. And I would just be like, Claudia, you know, why would you, how are you going to be an example as an animal communicator and now a teacher without working on some of the stuff with your dog? And, so we got it to the point where, they literally just moved to Florida, and they had to have all these workmen coming through, and people to fix things, and the dog is fine. I mean, he so stepped up. Um, she's once she gets her internet going, she'll be up and going again as an animal communicator. But it helped her relationship with her mother because she learned to get really neutral. It helped her daughter just got into college. Her daughter was failing a year and a half ago. Not yeah, fail not was not going to college. We just got her. I went to a college that has theater and horses, so she got accepted there. And then her son, who's been diagnosed with all sorts of things, has really settled and is the one. They got another dog. They had 3 dogs and 3 cats, and then one dog died. They got another dog, and the son has decided he's the dog trainer, and so therefore he's getting really quiet. So that was a family
Right.
affair. And the husband also went from saying, are you going to tell people you're doing this, to like listening in on her sessions from the other room and going, I can't believe you helped them so much. So yeah, it was a true family 360.
Yeah, that's what's so beautiful about working the way that you do, is that it's never just about the person and or the animal. It's like you said, it's a vibration, so it affects everyone around. That's so nice. It's beautiful. I'm gonna in a moment let people ask questions because I'm so sure that there are loads of questions here, and I don't need to ask all of them. But I do just want to ask something about the wildlife trips that you do, which you're
Mm-hmm.
probably not able to do at the moment. But I'd love to hear
Mm-hmm.
how that works in relation to communication with animals and just like what you do and what it's like. Give us a bit of a picture.
Well, I can sit and communicate with someone's dog that is, not adjusting well, and get a big long story, right? But I always say that I'm teaching animal communication to understand the story, to ununderstand, meaning like I love a no words world. And like to me, that's my best world here at my house, that we're just moving as a unit. And so I feel like on these trips that what we do is we don't go in and like necessarily find out. Like if I went to a barn tomorrow and a horse show, a showing barn, they might tell me that they're leaving on Thursday for a horse show. But if I went out into the ocean and said, what are you doing on Thursday? A dolphin might say, what's Thursday? So I like to say that, you know, animal communication has a context for the animals that are, there's level one, say, with us here in our homes, and level two might be some wildlife that ends up in a sanctuary and is in relation to humans. But then there's a whole other thing with wildlife that I feel like is really communing and not necessarily having to have a big conversation, but to be in time and space with them and to really exchange appreciation and gratitude. And so what I normally do is a meditation. I've got a couple great stories. One is, so I do a meditation that is really appreciating and kind of, I call it the gathering. We end up gathering so much appreciation and love, and um, vibrating that out, that we become a magnet. And I remember there was on one of my trips, we were in Botswana, and I the guide had overheard me telling the group that, we'll do the meditation at 3, and then, we'll head out and safari at, at 4. And so I said, I went and talked to the guide, and I said, I know it's kind of weird that we're talking about meditation, but I was thinking, he's like, no, it's not weird at all. I said, okay, cool. I said, is there a chance we could um, meditate out there instead of doing it here in the lodge and then be out in the Jeeps? And he said, yeah, that I know exactly the spot. So um, we had a big enough group that we had 2 Jeeps. So I sat at the end where both parties could hear, and he turned around. He drove and drove and drove, and then he just stopped, and it seemed like a nothing spot, right? And he turned around and looked at me, and I said, okay, we're going to start the meditation now. And there was nothing. There wasn't even a bird. And so I started the meditation. We got very quiet, and did this guided meditation, and at the end, I had everybody like, let's just be in silence. And uh, I heard one person say, I'm not seeing anything. And then all of a sudden in the distance, you could just hear this trampling, and the earth started thundering. And there must have been 60 elephants that came through. And like they came between the Jeeps. We were so close together. It was like they had to be around us and then keep moving. And there was one little baby. I've got a video of it. This one little baby just stopped right in front of the Jeep. And you can see her mom going, come on. And the baby's like, no, this feels good, because we all were just loving on that baby. But it's so fun. I have another, oh my God, I forgot about this one. I take people to the White Lions in South Africa. And one of the trips, this last one, last a year ago in the 2019, um, we were looking for 3 of the White Lions that Linda Tucker refers to as the Holy Trinity. And we looked and looked, and we were just about to give up. And the guide said, we'll go around this corner. We went around the corner. It's almost dusk. And off in the distance, we could see the 3 lions. And they were in a triangle, and they were being their little Holy Trinity. Then they came down closer, and they were, halfway between where they had been. So I started the meditation. And the next thing you know, these 3 lions started walking toward us and parked themselves, one right in front of the front right of the Jeep, one behind this. So they stayed in their triangle, one behind the right and one behind the left. And then we stayed just in that. One girl was about to panic because she, of course, you have 3 lions walking toward you. But we just stayed in that deliciousness. And we were there for about an hour. At one point, we could hear the kitchen calling the guide. And it was like, no, Mom, we are surrounded by lions. We are very late for dinner. So anyway, we stayed in that space with them. And then the guide said, Joan, we should probably go back. I said, I know, because I could hear everybody's tummies grumbling, because we were all starving. So everyone knows that I've got like a cat that only loves me. And so they said, well, we've got to get that one cat to move the lion to move from behind this tire. So I turned around and I said, could you please move? We have to get to dinner. And she just got up and went over to the other one, and off we went to dinner. But we were in that with these lions. So I like this beingness rather than having to communicate. Of course I've communicated with wildlife, and I've got ravens here that we imitate each other all day long. But it's I like you've just moved to a beautiful piece of land. You're probably walking around communing all day long.
I actually, we have these big flies that come in and they bite. They're march fly. They're called march flies, and this is a silly thing, really. But I find, especially if I'm meditating in the morning and I don't really want to be pushing them away, and they land on you and you can't feel them until they start to bite you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I've noticed now that and I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm observing and I think that it's working because it seems like it is, that as long as I stay really calm, I just say, please, would you go out? They almost always fly straight out. Whereas if I get into, oh no, here's a march fly, oh, then they just buzz round and round. So I haven't
Yeah.
done that. It's kind of little things like that that I experiment with. The birds and things, they're just flying around doing their thing. I'm not such a natural animal person. I'm more of a human, just like I've always
Right.
worked with humans. So it's never been my thing so much. You can tell an animal lover just just like that, and there's a different essence to them.
But
Um,
they're gonna pick up. So I love that with the flies. I talk to flies all day long. But if what I also love though is that I imagine the animals are doing their things because they sense your calm. They sense who you are. And they've got a better GPS than we do.
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah. And they're beginning to come in a little bit more. We've seen our first kangaroos now on our
Oh,
land.
now
Yeah,
I'm jealous.
we you can come here sometime.
I want to.
Yeah, you would love it here.
Yeah.
Well, I think that it would be really good if we open up to questions. So, if anybody has a question for Joan, what I'd like to ask you to do is click on the participants button and raise your hand. There's a hand raise thing, or you can write a question in the chat as well. So you can, but if you want to
Hmm.
speak, you can just raise your hand, and it's the easiest way for me to see because you rise to the top of my list. Um, okay, is so from Terry, is there a difference in the approach of communicating with a wild animal versus a pet? I've noticed that cats are different than dogs.
Well, I would say that with wildlife, like I was saying, I'm more of someone that wants to commune. And so one of the, I used to take people on dolphin trips, and one of the reasons I came up with the meditation that I came up with was that I noticed that people were so excited that they actually, pushed the dolphins away. And so I like to call it collapsing my energy field. I like to bring my whole energy field in internally, like just like I'm neutral. And then I really get a sense of who the wildlife is. And it's similar to communicating with animals. Um, it's just animals in our home are more used to our messy emotions and our ding, ding, ding thoughts going all over the place. So
It's so funny
they're,
because it's so funny. People often argue with me because I'm teaching them not to be excited also about money. Because when you get excited about money, it pushes it away, just like you're describing. It's so
yeah.
nice to hear that verified by somebody in a completely different field.
Well, and one of the reasons why I just naturally did that as a kid, like I said, I could give a horse a shot that the owner couldn't do, and it was literally, if I thought about what I was doing what you talk about at the beginning of a lot of your activations of just putting my entire self into the ground and being there focused, right? And it's the
Yeah,
same, yeah,
great.
it's the same thing.
Patricia, are you there, Patricia? You have your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Patricia's a baby person, Joan. I'm sure she can relate really well to what you're
Yeah.
saying. Patricia,
Yeah,
go on.
it's interesting. So, well, I suppose my question is in relation to my horse,
Oh.
and I don't want to call her my horse because she's a very independent lady,
Yeah,
and
I have one of those.
yeah. So, so anyway, I didn't go looking for her. I kind of acquired her from my daughter, but I think I've had her for a couple of years, and it's tricky. Like today now, I brought her out, and she was very, she was kind of feeling very fresh. And so I let her off the lead, and she booked and she booked and she booked. And then I put her back on the lead and lunged her. And then I got up on her and she wanted to book again. Do you know what I mean? So it's like,
I do.
it's quite difficult to know. Like, I don't think we've really kind of connected properly. And, or maybe she's too much of a mirror for me. I'm just not quite sure. I feel that there's something I should be doing to get it a bit better. Um, or maybe it's something that I feel there's something of a mirror going on there, but I'm not sure. So in a way, I feel maybe I shouldn't be her. Maybe I shouldn't have her. Maybe she's for someone else.
Well,
I'm
the
mm,
one thing I honor when something like she came to me through this. So I feel like for whatever reason, you guys are in this together right now. And I feel like whenever we have those kinds of questions, where we're like, oh no, maybe, oh this, oh that. When we're making up a bunch of things about them, we're actually creating a bigger division. And I think I would invite you to maybe collapse all of that story and just be with her, um, and just see what that's like. And one thing I do a lot when I'm, especially if I'm in the saddle and a horse is going to start being a wingnut, I try to drop into my feet, because if I drop into my feet and I start concentrating on my feet, I'm suddenly more of a presence for the horse, and a neutral presence. Um, that's one thing, but the other is, she might really be feeling your distance, and that's where the whole story is getting in the way. And when you can drop the story and just be in that space with her, um, you might really connect.
Yeah, yeah. I had a pony, and he used to talk to me all the time, and we had to sell him. I was devastated. So I think that's it. I think you're right. I think that's it. That I haven't made space for her. I think that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
We through my school, a lot of my students have to do case studies, and we
Mhm.
do EFT, emotional freedom technique. We do something called the scalar wave, and we do obviously animal communication. So, um, there's going to be ways to get in touch with me. So
Oh yeah,
we
great.
can
Wait,
always,
you put that up so for school.
At the end, I'll
Super.
before we finish, I'll make sure that you know how you can work with Joan, and I will give you a link, and I will also send it out afterwards. So yeah, don't worry about that. I'll make sure it's before. We'll finish bang on time today with no going over, and I'll make sure that that's in before we finish. Okay.
but
Thank you.
Let's
I
thank
really
you for
would,
that.
yeah,
Oh, sorry.
I just want to say that my horse now that I have had, who's 33 years old, I got her after Pet One, but before Pony Boy died. And I didn't think we were a match at all. And it turns out she's the biggest soulmate of all, because she's been with me for 27, 28 years.
Mhm. You know, and it reminds me of sometimes I know this from my own experience, and my husband is sitting right beside me. But sometimes, when somebody else in your life is being annoying, just they're being themselves, actually, it's really
Hmm.
easy to start that story like, what am I? And it's like a self-righteous, and I don't need this, and da da da.
Absolutely.
And I noticed what a distance that places. And the minute
Yeah,
I drop that, it's like it all dissolves. And I've created it in my own head and made somebody else feel so uncomfortable
right.
through the vibration that I'm creating. It's such a fascinating thing. And I don't blame myself for that, because we're both part of it. But I just find it so fascinating, that energy between, clearly it's the same between people, between animals, between us and life, really, and how much of the drama we create in our own mind, and the discomfort just by not not being satisfied with the way it is. It's
And
really
then
interesting.
that drama creates it to not be safe for the other.
That's right. That's right. And then you get all kinds of, we all respond to that in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this is very, very important stuff. This is the stuff that changes the way we connect with each other. And that's what we need more than anything in our world, I feel, is to be able to connect with each other and commune and communicate, like you're saying. So this is such beautiful work, because it goes so much more than, how do I talk to my dog, which
Right.
you
And what
make abundantly clear. So when communicating with wild critters, this is Andy, besides being quiet and neutral, are there other specific emotional states to broadcast that you recommend?
I find that, appreciation is very inviting for wildlife. So, like the ravens here, I'll just say, "Don't you just look gorgeous this morning?" And the next thing you know, they're like following me around when I'm doing horse chores. I found that even taking a moment, like when coyotes come running through here, like just going, wow, look at you. They'll stop in their tracks. And so um, it's, it's, yeah, it's just getting, again, collapsing your own story about everything and really appreciating. They really go, yeah, I am all that. And they, I mean, I know that the biggest wildlife scientists would say animals don't need humans, but if they started to habituate themselves with us, there's a way in which we can create relationship, and that's going to be either one out of need because maybe they've fallen out of the nest or they've injured themselves, or two because we appreciate them and that feels good to them, right? They're going to do what feels good to them. Feeling is their survival, so any feel good emotions for them. I mean, all of us, we live for what behavior is called blue ribbon emotions. So wildlife would have the blue ribbon emotions too.
And we live in we're part of nature. It's really weird, I
Yeah.
think, to separate ourselves from it. I have a friend who's a farmer and keeps all the poisonous snakes. He's set a boundary for them and he's given them complete free rein outside that boundary. But and only once has a snake come in, and that was something had gone wrong. He killed one once by mistake with his lawnmower, and then they started to come back in, and he had to go and renegotiate. But he's just literally negotiated the boundaries, and those poisonous snakes have stayed outside them all the time, which is that it's a nicer way
Yeah.
of doing it.
It's appreciation and respect.
Yeah,
It's
respect.
respect.
Yeah, yeah. So, a question from Stian, if I've said your name right, from South Africa, and thanks for the story
Mm-hmm.
about the white lions of Timbavati.
White
How
lines of
come
Timbavati.
I somehow find it difficult or not as easy to communicate or hear my animals or animals close to me than to animals with other people?
And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, as far as we have an agenda. Like I needed to hear what that vet was going to, I needed that vet to tell me that it was simply arthritis, or, that it was a spasm caused by blah, blah, blah. I, I couldn't, I wasn't ready, not prepared for a worst case scenario right now. So that's what we do, is we brace ourselves for what it is that we need. And it goes back to that story we talk about in our head. We also get really, and we not only get invested, but we, and have an agenda, but we even talk up the, like, you know, oh my God, I do everything for you. And, now you're going to bite the neighbor. So we have even a whole kind of, we make it about us. So I think getting to a really big neutral space and starting with, communicating over things that aren't um, triggering for you is what's going to help you start to hear the things in the household. And it, like that horse I was talking about, that turns out is my soulmate horse, that was much like the first woman, that was a horse that I got while I was grieving. Um, she, I literally can walk down in the morning and be feeding, and I'll just hear, help me. And I'll look at her and she looks fine. But then when I go look around her whole body, there's a huge cut and it's just a flap of skin. Right now, I've got to get the vet up. But if she hadn't said, help me, I might have gone the whole day without realizing that she really cut herself. So it does really eventually work, but I'm not going to say it's easy, but it does work.
I have a question from Claudia. Have you worked with spiders?
I have, and I've got tarantulas here, and I love to photograph tarantulas. But yes, I love spiders.
Savannah has a question. Savannah, do you want to unmute yourself and just ask your question?
Oh my God, a red-tailed hawk just landed right there.
I have a 12-year-old Labradoodle. She's like the size of a standard poodle.
Mm-hmm.
She's got arthritis in her legs, so she has a lot of pain and limping, and we're helping her with the pain, but I find myself limiting her running and playing because then she hurts. But she
Yeah.
told me this morning that she prefers to hurt and not be allowed to run and play. And I'm like, okay, it's just so hard for me to allow her to hurt herself. Basically, that's what's happening. So I'm kind of wondering, do I honor her wishes or do I do the human, practical, sensible thing?
Do you know that I'm in the exact situation right now? And my dog said the same thing to me this morning. I literally had my dog. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to honor my dog, and but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna monitor because I've got a pack of puppies, 3 puppies. Only one of them is 9, and she thinks she's the same
Yeah.
age as the other 2. So, I mean, I think it's going to be a combination of honoring that, you know. Yeah, I mean, I personally would rather be sore after a big hike, you know. I'm not young. I'm going to keep hiking into my old age,
That's true.
uh, and I think, and then it's hard for us to watch. Whereas if I knew I was doing it to myself, I would just walk around going, I did it to myself, right? But so I guess like I'm just going to. I've been with I have a CBD company for animals with a veterinarian, and I also distribute other supplements. So I'm just going to be watching my supplementation, doing my acupressure. I'm just going to be doing all the things to support that lifestyle that I know she still wants.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm going to be doing too.
A question from Lorraine. Have you experienced that an animal you're super bonded with who has passed comes back to you in another body at some point?
I have one here. Yes. One of my cats was a cat before. And it's remarkable. In fact, well, it's back there. I wrote about it. My second book came out with Sounds True, and they did 2 books. One is called The Dharma of Dogs, but the other is The Karma of Cats. And in The Karma of Cats, I actually tell the story of how I got one in like 95, and on the same day that I got her, I lost her, and then 2 years later, I got the other one, and we have a very magical relationship. And there's different personality things this time, and I think that's super important to honor. One of the biggest things I've seen with people who suspect their animals are reincarnation is they get very frustrated that the personality isn't the same, and it's really important to honor what that soul needs this lifetime to, what contracts it has and what it needs to do. But it's crazy fun when that happens.
Um, it would be really great if you can speak about your work, how people can get more of it. And there is actually a question here which we could start off with in relation to that. Will you speak to fear of horses and to get over the fear? What is your process, and do you have a program for that?
I have a digital class called EFT for you and your animal, and I don't know if you've heard of EFT, emotional freedom technique, but that is it works on acupressure points, and as you tap on the acupressure points that are connected to meridians, that are connected to organ systems, that are connected to emotions, you're tapping on some pretty feel good points, and they're same feel good points for animals that while you're bringing up the scary or your angry story, you start to release through that. And again, I've got a lot of students that have to get case studies, so there's always that possibility if you really feel like you want it. And they're advanced. But yeah, so I have a lot of little digital courses that you could learn basic animal communication, EFT. scalar wave. And then moving up, we just started something called Animal Communication Level 1. We've done one class of that, and it's a 12-week class. So there's a few people that are starting. I'm going to watch the recording and start this Wednesday. So that's for those that know that I want to try it. I think I want to do this. So that's more, even though it's beginning, it's kind of more advanced. And then I have a big program for people that want to become, and I also have energy healing for animals. So there's kind of these level 1 for animal communication or energy healing. And then I have a big program for people that want to they know they want to do this. And
so it becomes their work.
Yeah.
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 Okay, I'm going to share a link with you here, which is Joan has a series of videos. It's kind of like a four-part video series, which is a good way for you to get in and go a little bit further and find out a bit more about how it works and what her principles are. I imagine that if they sign up for that video, they will also get invited to your. Is there a Facebook group or some things like that? They'll become part of your ecosystem, won't they?
They'll
And then
become
they
part
will
of my
hear.
ecosystem. Yeah.
And so once you're part of the ecosystem, you can find out everything that's going on, find the right level for you, the right course for you. I think that the link that I've shared, which I've
That's
shared to
the
the wrong person.
beginning.
I haven't shared to everybody. I've just shared it to one person. It looks. I'll just do that again. The link that I've shared will sort of just launch you into the whole thing, and then you can find your place in that. And also because there are a bunch of questions here that we've not been able to answer, and I love to have all questions answered, but it never really works. So
Yeah.
I know that I've been in a Facebook group with Joan where
Yeah.
she interviewed me, and lots of people were asking questions there. So I'm sure that there are ways once you get into her ecosystem where you can have more contact and you can ask your questions, and then you can find out what's the right thing for you. Okay.
Yeah.
So I interviewed Joan because I've worked with her enough to trust what she does as a teacher and as a business person, because we live in a world where you want that kind of validation before you do a course. So I feel really good about introducing Joan to people who are in my ecosystem and having some kind of connection between us and some communing maybe between our two ecosystems.
Definitely communing.
Yeah, which is kind of already happening really. So thank you everybody for joining this. It's been really
Yes,
a pleasure.
thank
It's so
you.
nice to get to know more about your story, Joan, and to hear some of the examples. And I'm sure that it has been really inspiring and also very grounding. It's not all about the excitement and it's about being real. And I think that that's so
Yeah.
important for us to be real. So thank
Animals
you,
need
Joan,
us to
and
be
thank you,
grounded.
everybody. Say that again, Joan.
Animals need us to be grounded.
Yes. And we need each other to be grounded.
Yeah.
Life is just so much more comfortable that way.
Yeah. Thank you
So,
so much.
thank you. And anyone who goes and does some work with Joan, I really wish you well with that. And I would love to hear later what kind of results you get with your animals. I've seen a few results that people have had, and it's so cool. So, thank you.
Thank you.